I'm Kelly Lewis.
And I'm Tiffany Jones, and we're your Revenue Insiders.
If you're enjoying the Revenue Insiders, we'd love your support. Follow us, rate, and leave a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. Your feedback helps us grow and reach more listeners like you.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're listening from. Welcome to the Revenue Insiders. Today we have Bill Glenn joining us. I'm really excited. This is our first time meeting, back on the theme, Kel, of you have a connection or I have a connection and they're on the podcast. I'm super excited though, Bill, because we are going to talk about partner-led growth mainly today. It's your area of passion. And I am, again, I feel like another theme. I'm in the midst of the strategy involved in partner strategy. We are making a huge shift in how much of our business comes from partners. So I am ready to take all the notes and absorb all the learnings you have to offer. So thank you so much, Bill, for joining us.
Well, thank you, Tiffany. Thank you, Kelly. It's my pleasure to be here and be here with two Seattleites as well. So it's great that we have that three-way connection, and excited to be here on a sunny Friday.
I know. It's so nice outside. We should be filming this outdoors in a park somewhere, I feel
Next
like.
time.
Yeah.
It's good to see the sun. Well, Bill, this is, I think, an important topic. We have not addressed this on the podcast at all yet. And so I'm excited to approach a new topic. And I think it's a lot of what people are thinking about. I'm hearing about this more and more. And so your expertise, I think, I'm excited to learn. So first off, can you define partner-led growth in a B2B context for us? So how is that different from traditional channel sales or reseller models, or is it the same?
Yeah, I think, Kelly, first of all, it's a great way to level set on context, because I do think when folks talk about partnerships, I think a lot of times that can easily get translated into, oh, what's the community or what's community-led growth? And I think that really what this comes back to is, what is the investment that you're trying to make with partners for the long term? And those partners can be various types of organizations. So the types of companies that we've worked with, or companies I've worked with in the past, have been very much upstream. So they could even be like hardware manufacturers, OEMs that are creating that hardware, and then pre-packaging software right into the hardware before it gets shipped. Then you go further downstream, and it could be resellers, it could be distributors, it could be software partners that you decide that you want to go to market with, or you want to build a technology integration with. And so I think partner is truly a broad term in terms of partner-led growth. And I think you have to define that for your organization and where you think the most natural touch points are for the customers that you're trying to serve. Because I think that really answers the question is, where are the customers that you're trying to go after? And as a head of marketing, you're trying to define your ICP, you're trying to define your segments, you're trying to define, what are the vertical markets you want to play in? And then it's like, who are the partners that are already serving those types of organizations today? And what relationships do they already have built in a way that you can tap into and build those long-term strategic partnerships with and show value as part of the overall partner ecosystem? So the short way of answering it is, it's partially that it is about like resellers and thinking about like the traditional channel. But I think that as you get more mature in your partnerships, you can also start to broaden that out to say, what are the various touch points of your end customer and who else are they working with? And that can be all of those things that I just listed.
I totally aligned on that. And I think it's actually where I've seen a number of pitfalls in partner organizations, because people use the word partner to mean all of those things in aggregate and each one of those things individually. And then people start getting confused over what their partners are, what is their KPI for, because each of those partnerships has a different KPI for success in what you're doing.
That's right.
And even when I was at DocuSign, right, we struggled, in the high growth phase early on pre-IPO with the partner concept. We had tons of partnerships and we labeled them as like strategic and diamond and platinum, but like within those bands was a distributor and a reseller and a referral partner and Salesforce, who just said our name, and so they were a partner. And so I find that definition there to be so important to so everyone's level set on what you're talking about with partners.
Yeah, I agree, Tiffany. And I do think it also starts with have the revenue team in mind and in your go-to-market motion. So oftentimes it feels like a partner gets passed to marketing to say, well, go create a partner program, and then everyone will just come in and sign up. And I've taken the approach maybe differently to say, let's actually go build it organically, understand customer first, but then work back to who are some of the leading providers that we could partner with. And they could have various makeups, but we also have to, maybe this gets into another question, but you have to start small, right? If you just say, we're going to just try to take on the entire partner ecosystem from day one, you're likely to fail. So it really is about getting honed on your strategy and then getting a tight list of a small set of partners to begin.
You listed some things around like understanding your customer first. Is there a company size or indicators that a company is ready to dive into partners that you kind of see as foundational?
Yeah, I think given my previous experience, and this I'll draw from my time at Extra Hop, where we grew from about 40 million in ARR to just shy of 200 million in ARR. And I would say that at that time, we were very much more of a sales-driven culture and a direct sales motion. Intentionally, we felt like, okay, to go from 40 to 100 and eventually 200 and 500, it would need to be a partner-led approach. And I think at 40, we definitely felt like we were more than ready to take that on, and it gave us new avenues for growth.
Mm-hmm.
Before coming to Esper, which is where I'm at now, which is a smaller organization, Series C, is still in that high growth, but definitely smaller on the ARR side. At first, I was like, I don't know if we're ready for this. And then the more I looked into it, and the more that the team said, hey, what's our makeup today in terms of how we're driving business and how many direct sellers do we have? We actually flipped it to say, maybe this is the new go-to-market motion. And rather than hiring a significant number of direct sellers, how about we think about shifting some of those existing resources to go focus on partner, and then be strategic about the next hires that we do, that we're going to be all about partners. So I think now with this perspective of you actually can do it with a smaller size organization, I think your answer is, it really is more about, are you ready to think about an entirely new motion, but don't give up on the types of individuals you've already hired, because it's not that much of a cultural or business shift if you have folks that you already have on board that are really more end customer oriented. And if they think, hey, it's a faster path for me to get to customer and get to revenue through a partner, it's really more of a mindset shift than it is a size of company. And now we're ready from a maturity perspective.
I was in healthcare IT. I worked for a company called Avizia that was then acquired by Amwell, and we were heavily partner driven. A lot of that was from hardware partners as well as partners that did the actual video connections. And I think the hardest thing that I realized as we moved through the acquisition and had these sellers who had never done a partner motion have to do a partner motion is understanding, to your point, Tiffany, what do all these things mean? What's the difference between a channel partner and a distributor?
Yeah.
And how does my comp change? And then how do I interact with them? I was surprised, but also confused in my own self, is like how much enablement was needed to get sellers comfortable with, okay, if it's this type of partner, this is how you engage. Here's the process. You needed playbooks for each of these partners. And I just think we didn't assume that right away. It was a learning lesson. I made a lot of mistakes here, but yeah, I think it's interesting, and it's definitely something you have to be really thoughtful about, is those sellers that you're going to keep in their traditional roles, but you want interacting with the sales team and the partners. How do you enable them? What are you asking them to do? How does it change their comp plan? Because that's going to be the first thing they ask.
Yeah.
And rightly so. Yeah.
Yeah. I think, maybe spicy perspective here. Like, I think doing comp neutrality is the easy way out. Like, you're being lazy once you introduce comp neutrality, and it may be necessary for a period of time. We're running it as a spiff right now, for example. I think in pockets it makes sense, but you have to get the buy-in of why partners are valuable to the people in the org. They have immense value, and you all of a sudden have a team of people working for you that you control who you work with and who you engage with, and how you leverage them. I think that there is a surface way to run partner sales, and then a much deeper embedded, which I think is where the partner led growth really comes from, is to be truly a partner native organization.
Yeah, I want to riff a little bit on what we both said, which is, I don't think at Esper we would be nearly as successful in transitioning to a partner first motion if we didn't have the buy-in that we're one revenue team, and that intentionally, the head of sales and I sat in a room and said, we actually have a great sales enablement function. It happens to be reporting into marketing. We're not going to be territorial about that, but we're actually going to think about that sales enablement group transitioning to partner enablement. But half of what they were doing, like Kelly was saying, was like, how do we first just set the landscape for the ecosystem that we're trying to go after, getting back to like very traditional definitions for each one of these partner types and what are the differences. And that's made a huge difference for us in terms of getting our internal sellers on board to say, oh, this not only unlocks more value for the customers I'm serving, but it gives me new avenues to actually go get to these customers in a much faster way than waiting for marketing to drive inbound or SDRs to drive an outbound motion.
Yeah, one of the things you said earlier around like kind of shifting the organization without necessarily bringing in a whole new set of headcount or growing it. The enablement side is interesting. And again, like I'm living and breathing this today. So I'm taking notes on the side too, to your answers. But there, when you say partner enablement, again, like a lot of people think like, oh, you got partner enablement covered, check. But like you might have internal partner enablement covered, like your team, you figured out that gap, Kelly, you noted. But are you enabling your partners appropriately? And those are totally different tools. You have to course things differently. You have to incent people to take the courses differently.
You create certifications to be able to
It's
sell
a
the
whole
product,
different
like
beast,
all the things.
right? But it's all enablement.
Yeah. Well, I'll challenge that a little bit too, because I think this is a spicy take I'm getting most recently is I was thinking the same thing. At Esper, we're a pretty technical product. And so I was worried that our partner sellers on the AE side wouldn't necessarily like kind of embrace it. And they would maybe turn more to their solution engineers to like say, you need to go learn this. And then if you buy in, then I'll think about going and talking to my customers about it. But what we found is rather than going like the full certification route right away, because we thought we would have to, we're actually putting in new solution around gamification. And we're flipping what was a direct spiff to the partners. And we haven't implemented this yet. So it's a test. We'll see from a pilot. But we think the gamification is going to be the thing that makes the difference. And then shifting those spiff budget dollars to the gamification. So along the way, they are in essence getting certified, but it's more about like, how do they have fun doing it? And how do we show up differently than the 300 other partners that these sellers have to work with, right? Because if you just throw dollars at them, that's not going to move the needle.
So when you say gamification, what do you mean?
Yeah. So I'm not at liberty right now to talk about the tool that we're using. However, if it works, I definitely will come back and share a lot of that directly. But I think the biggest thing that we're trying to think about is how do we break down our very technical product into bite-sized chunks of like how the users are going to be interacting with it, and then what's the value at each phase of like if it's this type of persona, this is the way they use our product and this is how they deliver value. So what we're basically trying to do is say, how do you incorporate a value proposition statement with like a reason to believe, right? And then get almost like into the demo, like just snippets of the demo with video to be like, hey, when we say that we're better at this compared to 3 of our competitors, by the way, you might be also, reselling some of those competitors. Let me show you when we say this value statement in a quick, 1 minute or less snippet video. So you have to get the messaging down, but you have to get the visualization down. And I think video, frankly, is just like, it's the way to unlock this. And, you have to think like for me, I have to think like next generation of like, hey, if everybody's just consuming everything in TikTok, like what's my 15-second or less way to get this point across? And if you're doing it longer than that, you're probably not going to keep the attention span
You've been
of the
listening to our
sellers.
podcast. I feel like all we talk about is TikTok enabled.
I know. But it's so true. I'm like, if we don't flip our mindset to we're a B2C we should think more like B2C. And we have to think about like 15-second attention spans or less. Otherwise, we've lost our users.
People are people. They consume information the same way in both versions of themselves. So to think that like they operate differently just because it's a corporate professional B2B setting is just a silly assumption.
My 2 best focus group providers are my 2 kids at 19 and 17. And like, I watch them and or interact with them. And I'm like, I've clearly lost them in like 8 seconds.
Yeah. They swiped, they moved up.
Yeah. Right. They need an irrelevant button. And I would.
I like what you're talking about there though, because what I found when I did partner-led growth, or we had a really strong partner function, is the hardest thing was to differentiate ourselves with our partners. One of the partners we sold through was Google. Google has so many partners,
Talk about
and
ego.
trying to get the attention of their reps to bring us up was so hard. We obviously didn't have things like gamification back then. I really like that approach. I think it's really smart.
Well, let me add to that because we're facing that right now, but I've faced this at other companies that I've worked at. One is like I tend to be in the camp of like no more than 10 partners and ideally 5 partners to start. And that mix of partners should maybe be 1 or 2 moonshots, right? Like the Googles that, or even if you have direct access to Google, it's likely going to take long. Right? And so finding a couple regional partners that have an appetite to work with you and you have a better together story, either through a technical integration or just a better together go to market story, or you're going after the exact same type of profile of customer, it's really easy to get those quick wins with them while you're still trying to build out those long-term relationships with the companies like Google or Microsoft.
I like that a lot.
Yeah.
So, one challenge we often see in partner led growth, I've seen this so many times, is around attribution and visibility. And so, you want to make sure you're measuring success. Do you make your partners register deals? All of those
Yeah.
things. Talk to us about this. What does this mean? Where
Yes.
do you start?
Yes, process matters. You're talking about spicy. You're talking to the guy that like when I hear the word attribution, and I'm sure my blood pressure is like 50 points higher immediately just when that word gets
Sorry about
mentioned.
that.
Sorry.
So no, it's okay. It's okay. But I do love the topic, but I try to best I can if I am talking to board members, talking to other members of executive leadership team. I just try to make sure that we don't over index on who's getting credit. And I try to separate it out. Attribution is more of a marketing function for what's working and what's not with the investments that we're making. I fully get that we have to think about comp and we have to think about, where are these deals being sourced. But if you're, for us, and in multiple places I've worked, when you're going after enterprise size organizations, it's usually 50 to 100 touch points over the course of 6 months to 2 years. And so for us to try to get back to, well, is it a U-shaped model or a W-shaped model? Like, it doesn't matter. It's at the end of the day, it's how are we thinking about the journey of that customer and what are the touch points that we want to deliver at the best possible time that we can. And from a systems perspective, I always appreciate when I can have like a partner relationship management system where they actually can have deal reg and it's very easy to automate all of that. But most of the times when I've started, it's been like, how do we get our partner account manager to basically be the deal registration person by doing it in a Google Sheet and eventually getting it back to our CRM system, right? And there, that creates all sort of potential risk. But when you're just getting started, likely you're not getting like, oh, I have the same deal trying to be registered by 5 different partners. Who
Yeah.
got it first and when did you timestamp it? And so therefore who gets the credit, right? So I don't know, maybe in a more mature organization, I think like as you mature, you definitely want solutions that can actually automate and timestamp to try to focus on minimizing the partner channel conflict. But most of the time, I think it's like, let's start small. Let's use tools that we have available to us. And frankly, let's try to get the company not to think as much about who regged it as how did we actually start to engage with this customer? And then along the journey, what were the most meaningful touch points so that we can replicate the most meaningful touch points, not so that we can track like who gets credit.
What are the so in that I love that. I mean, I got off call right before this around attributions and those topics, and so I feel you on the blood pressure aspect of it. It's a mess to solve, and more so every moment I feel like forward in business it gets messier as new things are developed. But then what are the KPIs you're using? So if it's not attribution and deal reg isn't like top of your list, which like hurts my operational heart slightly, but
Yeah.
I can live with it because I hear the simplicity of what you're saying. Like what are the KPIs then?
Yeah, I don't. So Tiffany, I should be clear. We still use it, much to my chagrin,
Okay, fair.
and it's in a more traditional way of saying like, what's the source of the opportunity, and we do
Mhm.
break it down by inbound, outbound, and channel. Furthermore, though, and we have a first touch attribution model.
Okay.
We've considered going to multi-touch, but at the end of the day, and maybe it's unique to Esper in like thinking about our partner first strategy. Ultimately, we want every partner that we're working with as a priority partner to have an opportunity to work with us on a deal. And we would much prefer not to take it direct. If the customer prefers that we do that, of course, we can help them. But our position is there's going to be a partner involved. And so our biggest two distinction is, was it partner sourced or is it partner influenced? And frankly, I think that's what the board and the rest of the leadership team cares about is, hey, head of marketing, head of sales, you got together, you intentionally drove the new strategy for the company as a partner first strategy. So what they want to see is how much of our pipeline is actually being generated either directly by partners, or we're bringing partners in as early as we possibly can to help us shorten the sales cycle time and or increase our win rates. And to me, as long as we can keep that conversation focused on what's the traction with partners, we actually have had less conversations about, well, what's marketing's contribution to the pipeline versus some other sources.
We just had a conversation this week on the CS side of the business, and in partners, you like everything we're talking about feels very like new logo-esque, acquisitions and attributions and leads, deal reg. When you take a company that, like as you've done, to partner-led growth, what do you do on the renewal side? Do you start pushing your renewals to partners and accept some churn? What's the model there that you've seen work well?
Yeah, that's a great question and not an easy one to answer. I think mainly what I'm seeing as we're early stage on this at Esper, we have hundreds of customers that historically we had actually driven direct.
Right.
And so I think you're exactly right, is part of this is how we were talking about the enablement side internally for sellers, we're bringing our account managers and customer success team into all those same conversations so that they're up to speed on what does the partner ecosystem look like. And then we're actually trying to leverage those same resources to say, well, you all actually now have the closest relationships with a lot of these customers we've had for years. You should be asking them about who else are you working with. And what we've uncovered is where we thought we were like direct and they were the customer was used to working direct with most other software providers. Turns out that we're actually the minority in that case. We're uncovering like, oh, wow, we didn't know that you had 3 partners that you prefer to actually do business with. And we were the one-off. So now they're bringing us into their partner ecosystem. And it's our account managers and CS folks who are uncovering that. And I think that's actually helping with renewals and it's helping with expansion because not only we're trying to build trust directly, but if we start to build trust with the partners that they've been working with for many more years than maybe we have, it's a bigger opportunity for us to say, I think we create stickiness if we build trust with that partner and then they come back and say, Esper is just part of a bigger solution set that we want to think about with our digital transformation strategy.
This might be a hot take. I agree with you, Bill, but
Spicy combos.
I've had the same discussion, Tiffany, on like, do we do renewals through a partner, even though they originally contracted directly? Obviously, then we're taking a haircut on the renewal. Is that better for us as a company? Here's my hot take. In the world we're in right now, where renewals are really hard, everyone's worried about churn. When you can partner, especially through the big companies that have these marketplaces like the Amazons, the Microsofts, the Googles, they've got these bank of dollars to use. So instead of having to use their current capital and operating expenses, when they go through these channel partners, it's like I just have it's basically free money for them that they can use to pay for these. And so you're actually less likely to churn the entire account. You're just taking a haircut instead.
Yeah.
And so my experience recently, and my own experience, and then talking to other companies is, way better to be okay moving to the partner because it creates that stickiness. But also in the case of these marketplaces, you've got free dollars that they are earning through their hosting that you might as well take advantage of.
I think that there's the aspect of the marketplace and like access to money that you don't have, but there's also the notion that you need to feed some of these partners when you're getting started for them to feed you. And so there is like a model that exists somewhere of like a 5% haircut on a renewal. We just paper for you and we're giving you business, and like you start to like get interest in, outside of gamification of enablement, like interest from those partners and working with you back because you're giving them money essentially.
Yeah, I love this hot take. I'll just add one quick thing to it. We are 100% seeing that through a more of a product marketing motion as we looked at our competitive differentiation. In talking to these partners, what we learned was some of our direct competitors were, when they had this moment of renewal, they would hoard that account and they would just keep it direct. And so suddenly the partners were like, I don't know if I can trust you because it feels like you're actually trying to pull my customer away from me. And so we flipped it on its head and said, let's let the partner lead. And at the end of the day, if the customer says, I still want to keep it direct, I think the partner would agree, like we collectively want to serve the best needs of the customer. But more often our stance is, this is a partner first company. If we're being a partner first company, then let's figure out how to work it through the partner. And we're seeing then that the partner says, not only is there's a stickiness, but it's we're apt to more, refer more business to you because we recognize like you're in it for the long game and you're not going to take customers from us.
More advantage that I'll point out is the ability to multi-thread once you have a partner in there. So you typically are connected at one level in the organization, maybe one department, maybe a couple departments, but your partner, because they typically sell all of these different products, are multi-threaded. And when I say multi-threaded, I mean connected at all different levels within the organization, different departments. So when you're trying to sell different use cases, if that renewal now exists with the partner, they're now incented to go multi-thread for you. And multi-thread is, I think it's been the term of the, last 2 years for anyone in SaaS and tech. So that's a huge advantage there as well.
For sure. So what are the missteps, right? We've talked a lot about how you get this started. We talked a little bit about what you need to be from like a company size, but like what are the big missteps that happen when you shift to this partner-led growth motion?
Yeah, I would say, biggest at highest level, it always starts with, do you have the rest of the executive team on board? And if you don't, if you have to start there, and that seems like an obvious statement, but very, like kind of tying back to what we said before, even at the executive level, everybody has a different definition of what a partnership is or what the channel is. And what does that mean to actually flip that on its head? And so part of the selling process to the executive team is, this isn't an overnight flip. This isn't about performance marketing and all of a sudden you shift your dollars and here comes the pipeline. So I think it's making sure that there's an appetite at the C level, at the C-suite that says, absolutely, we believe in this for the long term, that the C-suite is playing the long game and that they recognize like this is a major lever of growth that if not invested in appropriately, it's not going to bear fruit. And so I think the biggest lesson learned is I've been at companies where we treated it more like a program and we gave it like a 6-month window. And I was like, there's no way we're going to be successful. So the biggest misstep is like still trying to make it work in a really condensed time frame. And we've set ourselves up for failure in doing that. I think the other maybe misstep, and I mentioned it before, is like, I think there's this notion of the, if you build it, they will come strategy with partners. And it's like, put up a great website interface about onboarding new partners. And, that's also a big recipe for disaster because you just get a whole bunch of inbound noise that you're like, these are not strategic partners, but you end up wasting a bunch of time trying to vet them. So I always like to say, start small, pick 5, no more than 10 partners to think about, and expect that maybe 2 or 3 are going to deliver for you in that 6 to 12 month time frame, and have that conviction that it's incremental improvements and incremental mind share that you're going to get with these. The other misstep that is like I like to turn into a positive is find a couple sellers that really are your internal champions at the partners, right? And let them do the selling for you. Get that first win with them, and then intentionally get that story, whatever that customer story is, even if you can't publish it externally. Make sure that every seller in that partner community knows like, hey, there's a win. And if this seller who hopefully is somebody that's consistently hit pipeline, but even if it's a great story of they didn't consistently hit their pipeline or hit their quota numbers, now with a partner, they actually did. Telling that story and having them be the champion for you is a massive win. And the miss is that you just try to push the case study or the success story through marketing teams, and you just don't get buy-in from the sales organization. Hate to say it, but that's the truth.
Yeah, totally. Okay, we're going to switch gears a little bit, Bill. So you've had a very impressive career. Obviously, would love to hear a little bit more about your career, and then I'd love for you to share, what do you wish younger Bill knew as he was going through his career journey?
That's a great question, Kelly. Well, let me say this. I was actually reflecting a little bit this morning. I'm now the 5th time a CMO or head of marketing at Seattle startups. So I'm a big Saturday Night Live fan. So I feel like I deserve a velvet jacket at some point.
Oh, yeah.
And we should like come up with our own, CMO type club because we need it. It is a tough job. It's a fun and rewarding job, but it's a tough job. And I think maybe like looking back over my career, the biggest thing that I reflect back on, especially with folks who are earlier in their career, is like, don't jump too early to I have to be in a startup or I have to be in big company and there's only one track that you can take. And so early on in my career, I started with a couple of smaller companies, but actually also had some time at bigger companies like T-Mobile here locally, which gave me both big company and B2C marketing experience. And I think that has really helped shape how I've become a good marketing leader, is to understand like the various stages and sizes of companies and what are the needs of leaders at each stage of the company. And so, for me, I would say the advice to younger Bill or to any of your listeners who are thinking about like, building a career plan, I think it's like, try to be intentional, but build in some flexibility to say it doesn't have to just be one way. And the other thing I would say is, a lot of people talk about T-shaped marketers or like, should I be a specialist versus a generalist? My point of view, and especially with AI, is like, the more that you can understand about not just your own function, and the more you just understand about being a good steward of the business, I think that opens up your opportunity to leverage tools like AI, Gen AI, but also like come in with a point of view that says, I can help the company in many different ways. And I think maybe the days of specialization, this is my hot take, is like, maybe they're going by the wayside and it's more about like, how can you be a more diverse candidate that really thinks about all needs of the business and has experience working not just in your department, but how you work cross-functionally. So my advice to me would be like, continue, like I didn't do this really well early in my career, is like, I often thought about like, how am I going to be the best marketer as a product marketer? I want to be the best product marketer I can be. But I should have been thinking about like, well, what are the needs of the business? And given my skill set, how could I actually get more involved across the organization?
Yeah, that's great. I love that.
I think we've had more hot takes this episode than any episode, and I'm a huge fan of it. It's great.
We are at the point in our episode, we like every guest that comes on to leave us with a question that helps us and whoever's listening form some thought leadership and their own point of view on a topic. What question can you leave us with to go ponder, Bill?
All right. So I didn't talk about it before, but I am a huge fan of Audible. And I've flipped to like trying to listen to as many books. And part of it is like business books, but part of it is more about like self-help and thinking about like the next phase of life. And I think this came from, I'm going to probably mess it up, but I'm most recently finished Meditations for Mortals. It was a recommendation by Matt Hines, another local Seattle great marketer. And I think it was in that one where the question was, what's the best that can happen? And I think that's like changed my mindset entirely from a risk averse marketer that says, what's all the downside, to let's flip this and be like, let's paint the picture of like, what's the most desired outcome and what's the chance that you could achieve it. And just flipping that mindset has been massively helpful for me. And I think trying to like push that with my teams to say, hey, when we say it's okay to experiment, we mean it. And we expect that there's failure, because without failure, there's not growth. And I think that coming in with that question for everybody is just a different way to like approach life.
Great.
I'm going to take that.
Yeah.
I love that. I think I need some of that in my life. That's great. Well, this was a fun episode. Bill, thank you so much for joining us. If anyone wants to reach out, connect with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Definitely LinkedIn, and my end handle is William U. Glenn, but I do show up as Bill Glenn. But yeah, the LinkedIn for sure. And Kelly, Tiffany, thank you both. It's been a pleasure, and I've learned a lot and had gotten a lot of hot takes too.
Good.
Well, if you aren't following us yet, please do on Apple, Spotify, or YouTube. And Bill, thanks again, and excited for next time we get to catch up.
Can't wait.
If you're enjoying the Revenue Insiders, we'd love your support. Follow us, rate, and leave a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. helps us grow and reach more listeners like you.